Welcome to PBS Together, where your passion for positive behaviour support becomes a pathway to excellence. Experience a platform crafted by practitioners for practitioners, combining the finest in online education to enhance your professional journey. Our bespoke courses go beyond traditional learning. Here, you don't just watch videos or tick boxes in quizzes. Instead, you'll demonstrate vital skills, preparing you for real-life challenges in your practice. Join our thriving community through tailored membership options. Access everything you need: interactive courses, webinars by global experts, supervision groups, and a trove of resources. Embark on a rewarding endeavour with PBS Together. Express your interest today and unlock a special discount for our founding members. Welcome everybody. We are super excited to bring you this webinar this evening, and we have Bernard Guerin, who is a prominent professor and distinguished author. He's so say hi Bernard. His research integrates various disciplines, including psychology, sociology, anthropology, even linguistics. Professor Guerin coined the phrase, something that I really liked, was interaction over isolation. So in his critique of individualistic approaches, advocating instead for understanding behaviour through interactions through in a social context, which it occurs, including social norms, cultural practices, and how they influence persons' actions and behaviours. So his curriculum includes extensive research and practice within Indigenous communities, refugees, migrant communities, and focusing on really important themes like discrimination and prejudice to reduce those in everyday life. In this webinar this evening, we'll be having the opportunity to discuss social contextual approach of behaviour and how this model can aid in developing better ways to support people. So welcome, Bernard. We're super excited. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Elder, and thanks for all of the people logged in. Different time zones, I noticed, different parts of the world. Well done for if you can put up with that. So I'm going to talk to you today about a very different approach to psychology. It's not original to me. It's built upon a lot of other disciplines, but it's what I see as the sort of basic way to understanding people's behavior, why people do what they do. As Tracy mentioned, I just call it social contextual analysis, and you'll start to see why the social is there, why the contextual is there. A lot of it won't be directly relevant to the work many of you do if you're involved with the positive behaviour support, but I'm hoping at the end to show you how it may actually be relevant to you despite that. I work with very different populations of people on the whole, but I'm guessing a lot of you are interested in just how do we think about people's behaviour in general. And I'll give you an example of a so-called mental health behaviour and a book that is coming out in about 1 week's time. And I think Tracy's going to announce that a copy is available to some lucky person watching today, free from PBS as well. Okay, now telling you the whole story is way too big for 30 minutes. I'll try and stick to 30 minutes. So I'm going to just go through some of the main points to start getting you oriented. Some of them you won't understand or you won't be persuaded just by me telling you the points, but it will give you a chance to think them through, and then you can follow up more if they are of interest to you. You can follow up more on those. Then I want to give you an example of the research in the book I was mentioning about 9 women who had a label during their life of eating disorders, and then how through a social contextual approach we talked to them, analysed what was shaping these behaviours, these very strange eating behaviours. What was shaping them? What do we need to know to figure out what was shaping them? And finally, then, hopefully if there's time, I'll talk a bit about just some thoughts I've had about how some of this might apply to people with a smaller repertoire, maybe people who can't speak, people with intellectual disabilities, how we might start to look at some of these things in that context as well. Okay, so let me go through. I've got a number of points. I can't spend too long on each. Just try and get the idea. You won't believe me straight away, but remember, there's probably a whole book written about each of these, and they don't all come from me. They come from other disciplines anyway. But I just want to get to what I really want to give you is that there's other ways you can talk about, think about why people do what they do. Psychology's way, I don't like most of it. There are other ways, though, that we can talk about why people do what they do. Okay, let's start off. The first couple of points then really come from behaviour analysis and other disciplines as well into behavioural psychology. Those of you who have done some applied behaviour analysis will be familiar with these ideas. Those of you who haven't, they may come across as a bit weird to start with. As I say, bear with me, read more, and hopefully you can start to get the idea of why these actually are not as silly as they sound first time. Okay, the basic starting point, two of them, is that almost all of our human behavior is shaped by the world we live in, the environment. Now, I don't use the word environment because in English, environment tends to mean the physical environment. Table, chairs, books, computer screens. Context allows us to think about we're being shaped by all of the context in which we live. Because as we're going to see, social contexts, relationship context, cultural context, societal contexts are the main determiners of what we do. So that's the first point. Then we're starting from a point very much like behaviour analysis, that human behaviour is shaped by the worlds that we live in. They shape us. The second main point is what follows from this is that if you want to change behaviour, you need to change people's worlds. You need to change their environments. Okay, not easy, but that's where the change is going to take place. Okay, so far then it's pretty much behaviour analysis, and there's a large realm of research looking at that. Where I go beyond behaviour analysis is to look much more at how human behaviour is shaped by social, cultural, societal worlds that we live in. Now, most of you may think, well, this is obviously ridiculous already. You're on the wrong track, Bernard, sorry. Because obviously what shapes what I do is what I think inside of me. The inner self, my inner person, that shapes what I do. I choose to do things. Now, that's something that behaviour analysis has argued against for many, many years. I can't go through all of that with you. Let me just say, most of what we call our inner self, they're my thoughts. I have them inside of me. Most of that is actually language behaviour. Language behaviour, as I'll briefly mention later, is also shaped by the worlds we live in, our social, cultural, societal worlds. So I'm going to skip over arguing with you about your inner world. Just start to think that my inner world is actually not inside of me. My inner world is actually the language, the discourses that I use. And they're not actually inside of me. They're in my interaction with the world, telling people things, making excuses, coming up with excuses for things. So it's not inside of me, it's in my interaction with my social worlds. Okay, I'll leave that there because we don't have time to go into that much more. Now, so far we've got behaviour is shaped by our context that we live in. We need to explore those to find out what is shaping human behaviour. Second one is if we want to change human behavior, humans thinking, human emotion, we need to change the worlds in which we live, the context in which we live. Now, the third part is that many of these contexts with human behavior are very difficult to observe. Now, if you see, like, I'm really hungry and there's a cake in front of me and I eat the cake, it's sort of like, well, okay, the external world controlled Bernard. He ate the cake because he's hungry and the cake was sitting there. But for a lot of human behavior, it's difficult to see how the environment might have shaped what I do. Why am I talking to you tonight? What shaped me even doing a talk? It's very difficult to look and see something. There's no obvious, like, big red button to press or something. Now, the point from this then, my fourth point, is that when people cannot see an obvious cause for human behavior, this goes right back to the Stone Age, wherever. When people can't see an obvious cause for something, they invent abstract or internal causes. But they are just words. They're not real. They're just words. We come up with words like cognitive processes, personality, spirit, mind, decision-making, mental. It's my mental behavior. The brain is one of the current ones. Why did I lift my hand up? My brain caused me to do that. Because we can't really see, there's no obvious cause why I'm lifting my hand up right now. If somebody had a gun to my head and said, lift your hand, Bernard, we can see an external cause. So the next point is that, yes, it's very difficult to see a lot of the environments shaping human behaviors. But the point is, don't give up on that. And part of what social contextual analysis is about is really spending a lot of time finding out what all of these hidden environments are that shape our behavior. Luckily, we have other disciplines like sociology, cultural studies, women's studies, anthropology, discourse analysis, sociolinguistics, which have already explored this. So we don't have to start from scratch. I'll come back to that a bit later on. So my fourth point then is that when people can't see what is causing something, they tend to make up internal or essentialistic explanations or abstract explanations. Your car doesn't start in the morning. You don't know why the car's not starting. There's no obvious external cause. So we say, oh, this stupid car's got a mind of its own. It's the personality. The car's too cold for the car. It doesn't want to start because it's Monday morning. And this is how, it's all fine. I don't care if people say those sorts of things, but it's the process you need to be looking at. We can't see an external cause, so we resort to coming up with these verbal inventions. And one of the things I've argued, many, and others as well, Skinner said the same thing, is, the history of psychology is also the history of inventing these sorts of word games, these sorts of theories about hidden internal, it's mental, it's mind. And let's say currently the big one is the brain. We really don't know how the brain works, but we're happy to say anxiety is caused through the hippocampus dysfunctioning. Now that's purely word. It's a word game. We have no idea what the hippocampus is doing really. Unfortunately, one day we might, which would be great. Okay, so the environment shaping our behavior. A lot of the time it's difficult, especially with humans, complex human behavior is difficult. I mean, with a dog, it's much easier to see what externally is shaping a dog's behavior. Pretty much food and social company pretty much shape a dog's behavior, which is great, lovely things. Cats are a bit more difficult to work out why they do what they do, but people, really difficult to see it. But the task I'm trying to do then is to say, well, let's not give up. Let's look harder. It's not that there aren't external bits of our world controlling what we do. It's just that we haven't spent long enough trying to figure out what they are. And we're resorting to these theories, words, stories, narratives that something in the brain did it. My mental state did it. My mind decided that I was going to do that. My mind decided that I would lift my hand up. But that doesn't explain anything. It's fictitious, in fact. Okay, the fifth point, and this is again another big one, and why it's called social contextual analysis. Sometimes I say all, depending on what mood I'm in, but let's say most human behavior, the parts of our environment, our contexts, our worlds that are shaping what we do are social. They're to do with people, cultural groups, other groups, society. Very little of what we do is shaped directly from the physical environment. In fact, most of our physical environments now are human-shaped so that we don't have much interaction with them. Everything's made easy. We have doors to walk through. So the next thing to get across is that if you're looking for all of these external environments that are shaping what we do, most of them are going to be social, societal, cultural parts of our world, not the direct physical world. Now, there are a number of reasons why this is. First of all of the stuff that we want, things that would be called reinforcers, rewards by some people, the resources we need in life, they now all come through people. To get whatever we need in life now, 2024, comes through other people. Everything involves dealing with other people. I don't grow my food. I go down to the shop, deal with the shopkeeper. I go to work, I deal with the boss to get money, to keep my money going, so I can go to the shops and buy my stuff. So one of the reasons is that everything we do now is directly working through other people. So in terms of what is shaping our behavior, other people become the key ingredient for that. Now that, I think, is one of the problems with current behavior analysis. They originally focused on like a little rat pressing a bar and getting some food. Okay, for us as humans, we don't press a bar to get food. We go to work, get money, go down to the shops or online with a credit card number. We're doing everything through people. So what shapes us then is our relationships with people, groups, cultural groups, economies. How the economy works is going to shape how we behave. Now, the second way that the social is important is that this is not a great way to put it, but to do it quickly with you, whatever we do in life, we also have, it's like a running commentary with language. We talk about things, which is for other people. So it's not that I walk out the front of my house and go to the letterbox out there. At the same time, I'm having thinking language about, are my neighbours looking at me? I'm in my pajamas still. Will they be laughing at me? So it's like alongside of whatever else we might be doing, we also have this social language going on. So that's just, I won't go into that more, but that's another way that everything we do is being shaped through other people. So if you want to understand human behavior, you've got to understand all of our relationships and what they're doing to us. Okay, just to jump ahead, we now have a way of grouping this. I don't trust groupings or categories at all, totally, don't trust them. But for our research, which I'll come back to a bit later, we normally talk about societal shaping, that is, things to do with society and how they shape my behaviour. Maybe I'll say a little bit more now, then I'll skip it, let's say more later on. So society shapes us through economies, laws, bureaucracies, patriarchy, the effects of colonization, a whole lot of other ways. We are living in a society where we are shaped. Now, I think my view is that that shaping of our behavior is nothing like reinforcement and punishment. There are different ways our behavior is shaped, and reinforcement and punishment is only one of those ways. So, for example, in general, I'll talk in general, I know there's plenty of exceptions. If I'm talking to a group of people, the majority of the women will have makeup, let's say, on their face. The majority of men will not have makeup on their face. That's something that can be specific to groups or specific to a society. Men and women have been shaped differently. It is changing a bit now. There's a lot more men wearing different forms of makeup and a lot of women who refuse to wear any makeup, which is good. But where do those behaviours come from? How are they shaped? Now, societal shaping, I've got a big list you can have a copy of if you want, or go on ResearchGate and you can look up the papers. Societal shaping is different to other forms of shaping. It doesn't work through a particular person. Women are not born with a person alongside of them, teaching them, reinforcing them for putting makeup on, punishing them for not. You don't have a personal trainer throughout your life. So how are you shaped by society? Well, it's across large groups of people. It's blurry, it's fuzzy, but it works. I mean, seriously, if you get a group of people, there's a big division. Overlap and more overlap. In 2024, there's gradually, the last 10 years, been a lot more overlap occurring, especially men wearing makeup. In my day, no man would ever wear makeup. That's changing, which I think is good. So an example of a societal shaping of our behavior, and it's got a lot of properties. I can't go into them all, but like the fact that there is no particular person molding or shaping that behavior. It occurs by groups, in general, the media. That's not like the shaping that occurs when a rat is in a cage with food pellets. Okay, so that's like societal shaping, and we have to learn all the different forms and how that works. There are some clues, for example, if you're talking to people and they use the words like always, never, everybody, the sort of words you get in generalized anxiety problems. If I hear those words, I'm starting to think, okay, societal shaping's going on here. If somebody says, everybody thinks I'm ugly, everybody thinks I'm fat, I'm ticking over, okay, there's something societal going on here. And don't forget, the big end point of all this is that if we want to change the behavior, we have to tackle that societal shaping, a really big problem. So it's not just like theoretical. It's that if you want to change this, you need to be doing something different in your interventions to tackle this. So there are some clues like that. I haven't got time to go into all of those. Secondly, we have groups, cultural groups, personal groups, families. Groups are like a bunch of people who share their resources and their relationships together. And then they use those pooled resources and relationships to keep people in the group and to do stuff that individuals couldn't do by sharing stuff. So 50 years ago, families used to share most of their resources Most of their relationships were within the family. When you were doing a relationship stuff like helping somebody, you did that within your family. Families have changed now. The kids don't share their resources with the parents, even though they share some of the relationship things like love and affection and stuff like that. Okay, very different way of shaping people's behavior. I've got to hurry up a bit here. So interpersonal shaping just means one-on-one. I'm talking to Elder or Tracy, and how am I going to get them to do something? How am I going to get them to go along with something? Again, different sorts of things occurring. So we come back to the beginning point, the first 2 points, once again, but I'm changing it now to human behaviors are shaped by social environments, which is everything from society shaping us down to your interactions as individuals are shaping. To change, the second point, to change behavior, we have to change those social environments. Those social environments are very difficult to see. Interpersonal, if you're watching somebody in an interpersonal relationship, it's often much easier to see how they're affecting one another. When you get to cultural groups, when you get to society, it becomes much more difficult to do that. Okay, I'm going to move on a bit. I haven't got time, unfortunately, to talk about language. Language is a weird behavior, but it would take too long, and it's very much nothing like you think about language. Language is shaped by our social groups, and thinking is also shaped by our social groups, but I haven't got time to take you through that. Okay, what I want to finish off with then is a bit about methods, and then give you an example to try and tie all this together, make it a bit more concrete for you. Give you an example of contextualizing eating disorders. Now, the methods I'll talk about within that, we've just got one of those new books came out called Conducting Contextual Research, which goes through all of this. But the basic method then is that if you want to understand what a person's doing, at least, let's say, a normal functioning adult, you need to be looking at how they have their behaviors been shaped by society, by their groups, their cultural groups, their family groups, in interpersonal relationships. You can also look at how their behavior might be shaped directly by the physical environment. But as I said earlier, that's not a big thing in human life anymore. Typically, anything with a physical environment, we buy somebody to do it for us. I can't mow my lawns, so I just pay somebody to mow my lawns for me. So typically, that's not a big deal in human life. So our methods, which applies to both research and therapy. I'm arguing in other book that this should also apply to therapy, to understand what's going on with somebody if their life is messing up somehow. Our basic methods are talk to the person, observe the person if you can. Participant observation if you can. This comes from social anthropology. If you can actually spend time with them in their world, that is a perfectly great way to do it. I've done that with community groups like a Somali community we work with for about 7 or 8 years. Spent so much time in the community with the community, and it's certainly the best way to learn about somebody's contexts. The other benefit of that is that if you're actually in their world with permission, you can't just barge in. This is all with ethical approval. If you're in their world, you are also experiencing whatever is shaping them. You begin to get the same things trying to shape your behavior. Like working with Somali and the stories they told us about bureaucracies and how bad bureaucracies were. We then went with them into the bureaucracies, and we had the same thing. They disliked talking to the people from that community. They were actively rude to them, even in front of us as researchers. So again, you can also experience some of that shaping yourself, which really helps. Now, we never do research a single time. That's one of our basic rules. We never interview somebody and then go away. We always do at least 5 or 6 interviews. They're usually long, they're casual, informal, they're like conversations, they're not like a series of questions. And over those periods, we start to ask them gradually about societal, cultural, group, interpersonal shaping of their behaviours. What has shaped these behaviours that we're interested in? Where have they come from? What shaped them? Now, there's all sorts of advantages to this methodology I won't go into. One of the main ones is that when you go back repeatedly with somebody, you actually, at the same time, you're checking what was said earlier. It's like a validity check. You can tell them, well, so far I've got the idea that this is happening. And they can say, well, actually, not quite like that, Bernard. It's more like this. So you're really spending a lot of quality, casual time chatting with them, but gradually going through all of the different life contexts to see what's going on with them. Okay, that's the main. I've also, in the book on therapy, I've also advocated the same thing for therapy as well, that the same sort of process should be going on. Some people are doing it already. Feminist therapists, for example, have always looked at the societal, patriarchal shaping of women's behaviour. They've got women to go to women's studies groups, feminist groups, and the women start learning, hey, this behaviour and the behaviour of my husband, that's been shaped by society. I'm not to blame. Society has shaped me to behave this way, and they start to figure that out. So there are people doing this we've learned from already. Okay, I'll finish off then. Check my time a little bit. Okay, I'm still, if I can have a few more minutes. The book, which one of you lucky people will get a copy of, is called Contextualising Eating Disorders. Now, I would go eating disorders, except the publishers don't allow you to have quote marks in the title of books because it stops people searching. It messes up searching, because if you search eating, it doesn't find it because the word is eating. And so anyway, it's not called that. So we don't believe in diagnoses. We don't believe in the DSM at all, but we do believe in the behaviours that are in there. So the first thing is, well, what are the behaviours? All I want to talk about is the 2 main types I want to focus on briefly. One is the actual eating behaviours, which are a mixture of overeating, undereating, bulimia, where you binge, maybe throw up, then starve yourself, back and forth. It also includes obsessive exercising. Now, as well as that, and this is something that became really important in the research, there's also a lot of behaviours about talking and thinking. Talking and thinking about what I should eat. What do I look like? What do people think I look like? Is that cake going to make me fat? I shouldn't eat that. I'm really bad if I eat that. I'm a bad person. So our basic question is, well, what has shaped these really strange behaviours of eating? We actually ended up calling them not eating disorders, but unusual eating behaviours, which they are. They're unusual eating behaviours for most people. What has shaped them? Where does that come from? Is it from groups, interpersonal, society? I mean, the spoiler, if you like, is that most of our behaviours come from all 3. And almost everything we do comes from all of those different shapers. Like putting on makeup, for example, it's society, it's the media, it's also your family and friends. It's also your interpersonal. things. You don't look very. You look weird today. Oh, you haven't got makeup on. Oh, I wouldn't. But most of it's not that interpersonal. Most of your friends are nice and won't comment, but it is in your groups, your family, society. And don't forget, males, this applies equally to you, why you don't wear makeup. You've been shaped, most of you, not like me right now, not to wear makeup. Where did that come from? What's shaping that? So again, the spoiler is that normally all of these are acting, most human behaviors I've found are like that. So what did we do in the research then? We ended up with 9 women who at some point in their life had had a diagnosis from a psychiatrist of eating disorders. We only did that so that we could sort of show in the research that this was real, and it wasn't like me judging, yeah, she's probably got an eating disorder, but that had a label. And all of the women said about themselves that they had recovered. So there were 9 women. There were 3 honours student researchers, all female, which again, part of the methodology. Normally that would make sense to have the female talk to female. Not always, but most of the time. They talk to them at great length, like hours. And that's what our research normally does. A small number of people, but many long, casual conversations with them. And over that period, going through societal things, what was going on in your life, focusing very much on what happened basically in your life, especially the family, what happened when these behaviors first started occurring, what was going on in your life, and then focusing on what was happening when you recovered, or you feel that you recovered from this. So focusing on those bits of their life. Okay, just what did we find? I'll try and be brief, Elder, for this. First of all, most of the people we've talked to with mental health behaviours, we've talked to lots of people in research with anxiety, depression. We're doing a lot with people who have a label of psychosis at the moment. What shapes voice hearing? What shapes hallucinations? Looking at the same question for them. One of the things is that with most mental health behaviours, the people have come from a really bad social environment. Bad interpersonally, bad in their family, abuse, neglect, rejection. Also, I mean, horrible stories we hear. It's really bad. We work with people who tell horrible life stories of what's happened to them. I won't say more about that, but that's for most of those, that's what you find. The eating disorder 9 women were a bit different, however. All of them came from very much loving families. The people we're doing research with who have psychosis behaviours, they come from some of the most horrid families I've ever heard about in my life. I don't want to meet their families. They sound so horrible. The eating disorder women came from very loving and caring families. All 9 were very, very different. Some live on a farm, some went overseas to Asia for some reason. They were very different stories, but the key thing about their family life was that they had very little control over what they could do. Their families controlled their behavior very tightly. In a loving way, that I'm doing this because I love you, sort of thing, but really control. The control was done in different ways. There was only one of the women who her father had hit her once, I think. And that was like the only abuse we found in any of their life stories. Very different to the other mental health behaviours we've worked with. So they were loving families, but totally over-controlled. So the girls, when they were young, had very little control over their lives. If they couldn't go out, most of them didn't have friends apart from their family. If they did go out, the family would go with them and sit in a car. Like if they're allowed to go to a party, the father would sit in a car outside and they had to be out by 10 o'clock, that sort of thing. Really tightly controlled. So the sort of shaping we got from this was something like, it's not perfect, but something like this, that the girls had very few behaviours that they could control their life with, very few things they could do that would have any control over their life. Some of them tried to do what we would call the depression behaviours, stay in their room, cry, not come out, but their families stopped them doing that, controlled them. You get out of there now. So they couldn't even do depression. It's like they weren't allowed to do depression or anxiety behaviours. So one of the things then is that one behaviour they did have control over is food and eating. They're being fed, the parents, the mother usually is controlling that, but they had some control over what they ate or didn't eat, complaining they didn't like stuff. And what we're getting to is that it looks like everything else in their life was controlled except that. Now, we asked about their brothers. Well, why didn't the same thing occur with their brothers? That was patriarchy, basically. Boys were allowed to do a lot more things the girls were not allowed to do. The boys could storm out much more easily. The boys could use physical actions against their parents. The girls couldn't do that. So we're getting this sort of shaping from a loving family who are controlling everything, where the only behavior you end up that you can control at all is to do with food and eating and, to some extent, exercising. Now, a lot of this came from the mother. I don't want to blame mothers. Mothers are blamed enough as it is for everything that goes wrong. What you have to remember then is we need to contextualize the mother's behavior. Where did the mothers learn to do this? Why are the mothers controlling? Where have they learned this? Some of that was cultural, some was societal. But so I'm not going to go into that, but we don't want to blame the mothers. They were doing that because of their own shaping. The girls also reported a lot of group behaviours, especially when they got online and found groups where eating and not eating were discussed and approved of. There's also everything you know already about the media and the images of women and what women are supposed to look like, and the size of women, what they're supposed to be. They also had that into the feed as well. Okay, there's a lot more I could say about that. Age range, well, the girls were between about 18 and 22, 23 when these events occurred. The girls we talked to, there were a couple who were about 22, but the rest were a bit older, and there was one woman who was in her 50s as well. Now, let's finish off then with, well, how do we change these behaviors? Okay, they're not bad parents. That's one of the, I think, almost like a problem. The parents are not bad. The girls love their parents, even though these behaviors were being shaped. The parents were doing it for their own benefit, the girls' benefit, according to their stories. Okay, 2 bits about the recovery. When we asked them about what was going on when this all changed for you. The first thing is, all of the girls eventually, usually in their early 20s, left the family home. There were all different reasons for doing that, a lot of diversity as to why they left. Some got jobs, some got interstate, some moved out and into with their boyfriend. But the basic thing was for all 9 of them, when they left that environment, the behaviors disappeared. Like that. It's like textbook. To change the behavior, change the environment. That is the overeating, undereating, bulimia, over-exercising. They stopped for all the girls, and they told us that. I moved out away from my parents. I moved in with my boyfriend. Very shortly after, I just started eating normally. So there was it's like an ABA design almost, or not ABA, but AB design, that removing, and again, this was all 9 of them, away from their family environment, those behaviours ceased. They had a lot more range of behaviours they could do, ways of adapting when things went wrong, when they were stressed out. They could now do things they couldn't do when they were living with their parents. Their repertoire increased. And it was like the behaviours of eating weren't required anymore. Now, the one thing we found with the last 3, it took us a while to understand this, but we started the last 3 women in the research, we asked them a lot more about their talking, their discourses. One of the things we found there, we're not totally certain, but it seems like the case that they left the family home, those behaviours stopped. However, their talking and thinking did not stop immediately. Most of them still had intrusive thoughts. God, I'm fat. I better not eat today. I can't have any cake. I look ugly. I'm too big. Everyone's going to think I'm fat. So the language behavior kept going independently of the others. So what we're saying here is basically the language is being shaped in a different way to those actual eating and overeating and bulimia behaviors. And what, from the little that we got from those last 3, it seems like the language stayed until they changed the groups they talked with, what we call their discursive communities. I'll give you one, the best example was one woman who left the family home, moved in with her boyfriend. Her unusual eating behaviours stopped. Her intrusive thoughts kept going. I'm ugly, I'm overweight, I'm fat. Everybody thinks I'm fat. I can't eat that, I can't eat that. What she told us, though, with a bit more questioning about who did she talk to, who were audiences, we found out that the boyfriend she moved in with was a vegetarian. Now, that's not a problem. That's fine. It's okay. Not blaming on vegetarians. But he was a vegetarian who loved to talk about food, what's good food, bad food, what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat. So it was like he was maintaining her talking about the bad stuff from her eating disorders. She then dumped him, picked up with another boyfriend who was also a vegetarian. That's why this is a wonderful story. He was also a vegetarian, but he didn't like talk about food. He just ate like most of us eat and don't talk that much about the food. You know, that pie was really nice. That pie floater was even better. But this new boyfriend didn't talk about that or what's good or bad, and kale is the best thing. Kale stops cancer. And then she said that's when her intrusive thoughts and all about eating and weight and all started to disappear. And she felt she had really recovered, not just from stopping the behaviours, but stopping all of these intrusive thoughts as well. Okay, up with time. That gives us sort of an example then of how we think it's vitally important to look at all of those sources of shaping. Social, but not social doesn't really cover it. We're scratching the surface by saying, well, interpersonal relationships shape a lot of what we do. But so does families and the groups we belong to. But so does society, economy, how the economy works. I mean, how money works shapes so much of what we do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be going to work. I'd be off fishing somewhere most days of the week. I wouldn't be going to work. But the economy, the way our resources are structured, means I'm shaped to go to work and earn money in order to do the stuff that I want to do and have to do. So the lesson then is that we think there's a long way to go in understanding people. The problem, I guess, is that looking for the external bits of our world, our context that are shaping us, it's very much about social, discursive, cultural, societal shaping, but they're very difficult to observe when exactly it takes place. So if I asked a woman, when were you shaped to wear makeup? It's like, well, there never was a time that I was shaped. There was no pressing a bar with the food pellets. It just happened over time by whole. And men, when were you shaped not to wear makeup? Again, so very difficult to see. And what our basic agenda is, how can we use sociology, women's studies, social anthropology, organizational studies to fill in some of those shapers? The research is out there in the social sciences, but psychology and I regret to say behaviour analysis also tend not to read any of that. Maybe lip service to it, but they don't read it. So a lot of it's already out there in the research world. So all I think we're doing a bit different is really applying behaviour shaped by the environment to change behaviour, change the environment. All we're really adding is, wait, hang on a second. Human environments are very complex. There's a lot of things going on. Many of them you can't see unless you do a lot of research. How do we do that? And that's what we're trying to pursue in that. Okay, I better stop there. I think that's correct. Happy to answer questions, though.
Thank you so much. That was really super insightful. In my excitement to introduce you, I forgot to introduce some other people. So we've got Professor Gusso, who's our Head of Educational Technology at PBS together. And we have a guest facilitator this evening, John Wooderson, Director of Training and Non-Training Solutions, and he's going to facilitate the question time. He's from Chameleon Group. So welcome, everybody, and over to you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Bernard. That was a fascinating talk. So much covered in such a short time. And there are a bunch of questions that I have with limited time, but a couple that are related that were in the chat. And the first one is around whether is this new emerging culture of individualism, is it in some way causing the mental health issues like anxiety, for example, in younger generations? And so maybe you'll answer that. But then there's a follow-up question around that. Has this social anxiety, this increase in social anxiety and trauma in the last decade, have we been so societally shaped to be more ready to pathologize and talk about it?
I think broadly yes to both questions. I think the increasing individualism, you need to go back a step and say, well, what's shaping that? I think it's real. I agree with the questioner. I think it's real. But you have to go back a step and ask, well, what's shaping the individualism? And we can go straight to a sociologist of the economy, Georg Gimel, who's writing that basically it's our form of economy that is shaping that individualism. Once you get money, you can do things as individuals. You don't need your family anymore. You don't even need friends for that matter. You can always find new friends. So I think, yes, I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's like bigger things going on that have shaped that individualism that are also then shaping the anxiety and other things the question was asking about. I think a lot of it is the capitalism system. Again, there are some positives about capitalism, but it does lead to an individualism because we, as individuals, we can have money or not. And there are 50 people in the world that have more money than everybody else in the world combined. We know some of their names, in fact. We also have the societal is then, so that also then leads to the breakdown of the family, which again was one of Gimel's points. So again, sociologists writing 80 years ago about this was already describing what in society is shaping our individual behavior. There's sometimes a misconception that sociology is only about big numbers. But in fact, sociologists have always talked about what in society is shaping individuals. And so there's a lot there already about what led to that individualism. Now, I think what follows from that is that once you become an individual, everything becomes dependent on your money, which money is extremely uncertain. It's run through government, through bureaucracy. Like we've got tax coming up in Australia fairly shortly. Who understands the tax laws? I don't. We have to work through other people, pay people to do our taxes. And so I think that shift, is introducing a lot of this anxiety that the two questions are talking about. I think it's very real. So I don't like the word mental, as in it's not something about what's inside of you. I don't like the word health. It's not about your physical health, your brain. It's about how you're being shaped in this really weird new world. And the internet's made that even more different again. So I'm not sure how well I'm answering, but yes, certainly mental health issues and the increase in depression and anxiety in particular, and especially amongst young people. I mean, compared to when I was young, the world for young people today, as I see it, is horrible. Thinking ahead to how do I plan my life? What will I be able to do in my life? Yeah, I'd be scared. I can't say scared shitless, can I? But if I could, I would say that. It was in quotes, so I never said it. So yes, it's this. So I mean, I won't go through. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this is all occurring, but I think the general point is there. What's shaping though a lot of the mental health behaviours is the way society has changed in the last 50 years, especially away from families. You are becoming an individual with your money up against the whole world. And that's like a really scary thing if you think about it. It could be that your husband of 40 years suddenly leaves you. And it's you against the world with whatever money you end up with. So yes, but again, I hope you can see the two people asking the questions there. It's the societal shifts that directly shape the mental health behaviours. That's a sort of position that's been in sociology for a long time, and we're trying to put back into psychology. The DSM does not help at all. The DSM's okay because I like the listing of behaviours. If you're a behaviour analyst and trying to find out, well, what are the mental health behaviours? They're all listed in the DSM. That's great. But the analysis, the causality, all is just crazy to me. So I don't know if that answers your question or gets on the way, but I certainly agree then that the societal shifts, and a large part of that is towards we are facing the world as individuals. 50 years ago, our family would help us out. If things went bad, our family would look after us. And our family, don't forget, 50 years ago, would have included uncles and aunties, cousins, would help us out. Now, there are probably not many cousins, depending on your family structure, there are probably not many cousins who would help you out if things went bad for you. They would write a nice email to you and say, oh, really sorry to hear about that, but that's about it. So I think it illustrates nicely in a way that what we call mental health behaviours that are inside of us, my brain's going all wrong, are really shaped by society. Partly also by groups and cultural groups that can make things worse or better. And it can be from families as well, like the eating disorder one suggests. Okay.
Bernard, do you mind if we go for a few more minutes? Because I know people have
No, I don't mind if you're okay, yeah.
Okay, so we might do that. For people who do have to go on time, though, thank you so very, very much for attending. Really, really appreciate it. Make sure that you follow Bernard's research, and also, Helder will be pulling out a lucky name, and we will be gifting the Contextualising Eating Disorders to someone tonight. So Helder is going to get onto that. And also anyone that's attended tonight, we've got over about 120, 130 people, Spain, Australia, all over the place. Thank you so very much for attending. And please make sure you follow PBS Together. We've got lots and lots of really great things happening, so you don't want to miss out. So I will let Helder pull out a lucky name and hand it back over to John.
Thank you, Tracy. I just organized here. We already have a winner. Let me show you here. Emma from Adelaide, Bernard, neighbor, probably. Congrats, Emma. You just won a book. Please write to us or wait for us to write to you, and we get in touch to send to you the book that you just won. Congrats for that. And also, just advertisement for next month, we have a new webinar already booked with Professor Tacita Misael. She works with Professor Bernard. She's from the same research group. And it's going to be some really amazing activity. Thank you.
The next question that we have is from Gabby, and she started with a comment. I know people with schizophrenia with wonderful families, supportive, positive childhoods, and no history of abuse. Did you find causes in your research from other socially informed effects?
Okay, very good question, Gabby. We've been working in the research with some, I don't know how to put it, fairly intensive people. So what you're saying, I mean, yes, there certainly are. One of the things, I guess, is that there, it's got to be the case. There's a lot of diversity. Again, if you approach things with people that they're all going to be the same and everybody labeled as schizophrenic is going to be the same, that's never going to happen. So there are many paths by which these things happen. So the question there for us would be, if we talk with somebody who had a label of schizophrenia, they seem to have great family, supportive, positive childhood with no abuse. The question for us is, well, why or what behaviours and how did those behaviours get shaped? So again, basically, I don't know the answer. I'm leaving it open. That's how we would ask the question. And I can see that there are several ways that might go, given the diversity of people. It very much depends on the behaviour as well. Voice hearing, for example, most of the stuff we've done with voice hearing, the people have maybe okay families, but the way they talk has not been dealt with very well. Most of the people we found with voice hearing, for example, will tell us that when they were kids and they came home from school, they couldn't tell any stories. Nobody was interested. They told them to shut up. So they just had a really bad discursive community. No one wanting to talk. They were punished for talking. Everything they said, the parents opposed it and said, oh, that's rubbish. You don't know what you're talking about. Or they couldn't ask for things. So I don't know the answer. How somebody, it depends on the behaviour. And again, the behaviours are interesting again because all of the behaviours in the DSM, I've been through them all. I made a table in one of the books of most of the behaviours in the DSM without their labels and put into alphabetical order. So you weren't like lumping them together. You just saw them as individual behaviours. And truly, every one of them is something we all do. Like voice hearing, for example, I hear music constantly throughout most of the day. I can hear a song in my head. It's not really in my head, but that's okay. And now there are a couple of songs I hear and I know my mood. I know something is troubling me about this if I hear that, if that song's going around and around for a day. So they're all like, or maybe I'm not normal, but they're all normal behaviors we have. I mean, can you hear your mother's voice saying, put that down, you'll hurt yourself? Okay, we can actually hear voices. People with voice hearing problems is where the voices are loud, insistent, intrusive. The treatment is generally now the good treatment. Psychiatric treatment is to give you a whole lot of drugs and hope the voices go away. The good treatment is you start talking to the voices, asking them what their function is. The voices stop being angry, and most people with voice hearing don't want the voices to go away because they know they're useful in some part of their life. So where I'm getting to is that some of the people you're talking about, Gabby, perhaps they got a diagnosis of schizophrenia just because they mentioned something like hearing voices to a psychiatrist. I wonder why they were going to a psychiatrist in the first place. What was going on? If it was voice hearing, what was going on with their language? That voice hearing was shaped. They weren't able just to say things out loud all the time. There's sort of a gradation between not saying something out loud because you'll be punished for it, to hearing the same thing, like everyone thinks I'm stupid. I'm not going to say that out loud normally, but I may think it. It may happen as a thought occasionally. Then it might start getting louder and more insistent. And I'm asking the question, well, what's shaping that voice to say that bit of language to appear like that? So there could be the diagnosis is the problem. I do know cases where somebody's mentioned something, like they've gone to a GP and they've said, well, yep, I hear somebody talking to me, and it's quite innocent. It's like, in certain times of your life, you may well hear something your father always said. One of the women in the eating disorder study, she said that. She said, I'm now in my 50s and I look at the piece of cake and I can just hear my father's voice still. You're going to get fat eating that. So the person may have said that to a GP, which led to a diagnosis. That's really unfortunate. And I wish that never happened, but it does. So I don't know. I just want to find out more. It's not that I'm doubting you, Gabby. It's just that almost all of the people with that diagnosis that we've talked to, there are really bad family. Again, seriously, some of the worst, probably the worst life events I've ever heard in my life. And I've heard some horrible life events from refugees and others. And some of these people with the psychosis, schizophrenia label have some of the worst family upbringing lives I've ever heard of in my life. It could be delusions. We published a paper a couple of years ago on delusions. And again, everybody tells stories. We tell stories to get laughs. We tell stories for people maybe like us. I've been telling you stories tonight for nearly an hour. I've been telling you stories. We tell stories. What is it that shapes a person to tell what we label delusional stories? I'm the King of England. Seriously, I'm the King of England. What shapes a person to be saying those sorts of stories? What in their world? So that's what the paper was just starting to get. How can we think about this question? Rather than what's broken in my brain that I have delusional thoughts and delusional stories. It's all everyday life as well. I tell conspiracy stories, which are delusional. Almost always it's for a laugh, to get someone to laugh and fun, bonding, blah, blah, blah. But we tell those sorts of delusional stories. We tell jokes that are delusional, something not true. So what's functioning in this person's world that they end up telling a lot of delusional stories seriously? One of them became president of the United States not that long ago, for example. He managed to do that. So what is it in the person's life? So again, it could be something where the person has a very good family life, but they may leave their family and start living with groups of people who don't respond to any normal stories, normal joking, only conspiracy theories, delusional stories. I saw a UFO yesterday, I'm the King of England, or something like that. So there's a lot of ways that could be shaped. I don't think there's one way. Again, we need to get all of this back to observing individuals and what life they've come through that might have shaped that. That's the sort of agenda for it. So I don't have the answers, but that's where I would look basically next. So, okay, most of the time though, we find, especially with behaviors of psychosis that are labeled psychosis, generally anxiety and depression, there are a lot of family issues, but not real serious. But a lot of the other, like certainly like we've talked to people with borderline personality disorder, and they've had some of the worst life ever as well. And their behavior's been shaped all over the place, which is one of the characteristics that gets them the label. They do different things every time. They don't form relationships. We did a research study on that. Sorry if I'm raving a bit here. 5 or 6 years ago now, with some Indigenous Australian women who had had a label of borderline personality from a psychiatrist. And what we did was we got all of the criteria, 9 criteria for borderline personality, and we asked that person, the 5 of them, about those behaviors in their life. And basically, all of those behaviors were equally likely to have been shaped by colonization, the effects of their family from colonization. So borderline personality, one of the criteria for psychiatrists is that you have difficulty forming attachments and you're scared people are going to leave you all of a sudden. Now, every one of these women, as soon as we mentioned that, they all said, we have 3 generations of stolen generations where mothers had their babies taken away. That was like lived experience for them. So it's like, well, what's shaping you to be scared that people are going to leave your life? Well, you know, it's sitting right there for you. Okay, it doesn't apply to everybody else, but, you know, you can start to see, once you look for it, you can start to see the cultural, in this case, colonization effects, the effects of the Australian colonization process on those women, and the behaviors they then were shaped into resembled the behaviors of what are called borderline personality. And so, of course, they got a big tick on most of the boxes and they got a diagnosis. So again, that was another example of really being able to see a societal colonization, in this case, effect. And there were other things. We looked at their personal lives as well. You know, their personal family relationships were basically hopeless, but again, from colonization. Not because they're bad people or anything like that, but they've had generation after generation of really bad family relationships because of Western society intruding. So again, the same sort of thing, a so-called mental health behaviors. If you actually start asking, I think, the right questions, you can start to see, well, they're being shaped by all this other stuff. That's what shaped these behaviors. But again, in different ways, perhaps, as well. That's a long answer, Gabby. But again, it's not that I would say, no, you're wrong. A person from a nice family could not be shaped into a schizophrenia behavior. It's just there are a lot of questions that need to be asked and followed through. What was the behavior? Was it, you know, catatonia? Probably not catatonia behavior, for example, which is one of the psychosis behaviors. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that could have happened.
I think in a lot of ways, it sounds like in your work, you're searching for the rational reasons for this behavior that looks very irrational, very maladaptive, but of course it's adaptive to very difficult, like unexpected circumstances for a lot of these people.
Absolutely. And again, we're not alone. There's a lot of groups around the world are saying the same thing, you know, and I agree with them. What I think maybe is different with what we do is that we actually develop research methods to actually find these things out, not just hypothesize, oh, that's something societal. You know, the mental health is wrong. It's all shaped by society. We actually look at individuals over time, talk to them in depth, spend time with them if we can. We haven't been able to spend time with the people with psychosis behaviors in their family groups. That would be, I mean, pretty scary. What I know about their family groups, it would be scary, and we would never get ethics approval to do that. But you know, that's where it should be leading. But yes, totally agree, John. It's really saying, well, let's yeah, we all agree. It's been said for a long time. Ronald Lang said the same thing. It's, you know, it's not a mental health problem. It's how you've been shaped by society and groups. What we're doing, I think, which I think is
I think we have a small issue with Bernard connection. Yeah, we have an issue. Well, we have a few more questions on the chat. Maybe we can ask Bernard to discuss a little bit, and maybe to write a newsletter or something to discuss a few more topics if people like the idea. Maybe it's time to finish the session, John.
Yeah, let's call it a day there. Thank you, everyone. What a wonderful discussion. Excellent questions. And we'll forward those other questions on to Bernard and see if he can provide some responses. Thank you all.
And don't forget, everyone, sign up for BBS Together. There's lots of really exciting things to come. So please keep in touch with us. And thank you very, very much for coming. And make sure that you click in next month, the 2nd of July, for our next webinar, our free webinar. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. Congratulations for the book as well. Well done. Thanks, John. Thank you.